It began with whispers, half-truths buried in local lore, stories told in hushed tones at family gatherings, a shadowy figure who came and went like a ghost, leaving questions no one dared to answer. Some called it coincidence, others called it fate, but when the disappearances started again, the name resurfaced, cutting through the silence like a blade: the latchkeeper. The first reports came in 1987, 3 missing hikers, their campsite untouched, their belongings neatly arranged, no signs of struggle, no trail to follow. Then nothing for 10 years, no bodies, no leads, just absence. But absence tells its own story, doesn't it? Now, 30 years later, the pattern is back, and if history is any guide, it's only the beginning. For decades, the legend of the latchkeeper has lingered like a dark cloud over the town of Crescent Pines, known for vanishing without a trace. His victims were never found, their lives erased as if they never existed. Now, with 3 early similar disappearances reported in the last 6 months, investigators are reopening the cold case that has haunted this quiet community for over 30 years. 3 hikers, all seasoned outdoorsmen, have vanished from the same stretch of Crescent Pines National Forest where the original disappearances occurred. Despite search teams combing the area, no evidence has been recovered. On is the chilling commonality: all their campsites were found undisturbed, just like before. He knew these woods better than anyone. He wouldn't just walk away. Something happened out there, and we need answers. Crescent Pines has always been a place of quiet refuge, where the forest stretches endlessly, and the wind carries secrets no one dares to chase. But for those who vanish here, the silence is deafening. Investigators describe a chilling scene at each campsite: tents perfectly zipped, supplies untouched, campfires reduced to glowing embers, as if whoever or whatever was responsible wanted to preserve the illusion of normalcy. What makes these disappearances so unsettling is the lack of struggle. No torn fabric, no signs of a fight. It's as if the victim simply stepped out of their lives and into nothingness. And then there's the calling card, the one detail tying all the cases together: an antique latch, aged and rusted, left carefully placed at each scene. It's an object so ordinary, so innocuous, that investigators initially dismissed it as coincidence. But with each new disappearance, the pattern became undeniable, and with it, the legend of the latchkeeper was born. Back in '87, we thought we were dealing with a drifter, someone who didn't leave a footprint. But the latch, that was deliberate. It was like he was mocking us. It wasn't until years later that we realized he wanted us to know it was him. But the question remains: is this the work of a copycat? Or has the latchkeeper returned? And if he has, why now? I don't know if this is real or not, but we found another one. The latch, right here. I think someone's watching us. Before the legend became a ghost story whispered around campfires, there was the man, or at least the belief in one. In 1987, the latchkeeper became the subject of the largest manhunt in Crescent Pines history after 3 experienced hikers disappeared without a trace. Suspicion fell on locals, drifters, even hunters, but no arrests were ever made. Law enforcement combed nearly 100 square miles of forest, but they came up empty-handed. Then, in 1992, a break in the case, or so they thought. A local handyman, Grant Quarles, was arrested after police found an iron latch matching those left at the crime scenes in his truck. Quarles had a history of violence and a reputation for lurking near hiking trails. He was charged with the disappearances, and for a brief moment, it seemed the nightmare might be over. I remember the trial. I thought, this is it, we'll finally get justice for my brother. But when they read the verdict, it was like losing him all over again. Lack of physical evidence and conflicting testimonies led to Quarles' acquittal. The case went cold again, and Crescent Pines was left with more questions than answers. But what the town didn't know was that Quarles wouldn't stay out of the spotlight for long. In 2002, Quarles resurfaced as the prime suspect in a series of break-ins and assaults in a nearby county. This time, the evidence was damning: DNA, eyewitness accounts, and a string of victims willing to testify. Quarles was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 25 years in prison. During the trial, survivors described the terror he inflicted, how he'd break into homes, always calm, always controlled. It wasn't just what he did, one victim said. It was how he made you feel like you didn't matter, like you were already gone. For 2 decades, the community believed they were safe, that the man some had called the latchkeeper was finally behind bars. But last year, everything changed. Grant Quarles was released early under controversial rehabilitation program designed to reintegrate offenders into society. The program, known as Pathways to Redemption, claimed Quarles had been rehabilitated through intensive therapy. His release sparked outrage among survivors and their families. They said he's changed, one victim said. But how do you undo the kind of evil he's done? How do we know he's not going to do it again? With Quarles living just miles from Crescent Pines, the community is on edge. Local law enforcement insists they've increased patrols and added new safety measures, but residents are far from reassured. And now, with the recent disappearances eerily mirroring the latchkeeper's original crimes, the town is asking the question no one wants to answer. Was Quarles innocent all along? Or has he returned to finish what he started? For most of its history, Crescent Pines was a haven for outdoor enthusiasts, a place of peace and isolation. But that changed in the fall of 1987, when the first of 3 hikers vanished within weeks of each other. Despite extensive searches, the only clues left behind were the undisturbed campsites and a rusted iron latch found near the fire pits. The sites were spread across a 20-mile radius, each more remote than the last. Search teams scoured the areas for weeks, but no tracks, no personal effects, nothing but the latches were ever found. Locals began whispering about a predator who could walk among them unseen, leaving no trail but his sinister calling card. In 1992, Grant Quarles was arrested after being linked to the case. A known drifter with a history of violence, he seemed to fit the profile of the shadowy figure haunting Crescent Pines. Police found a latch in his possession, similar to those left at the scenes, but the evidence was circumstantial at best. Ladies and gentlemen, this man carried with him the exact item left at every disappearance site. Is it coincidence? Or is it evidence that he's the one who stalked and took these people? I didn't kill anyone. Those latches, I found them, left out in the woods, same as anyone could have. They said they didn't have enough proof, that they couldn't convict him. But we all knew he had something to do with it. And now he's out, and people are disappearing again. After his acquittal in the latchkeeper case, Quarles faded from public view until 2002, when he was arrested for a string of home invasions and violent assaults. This time, DNA evidence and survivor testimony ensured his conviction. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and Crescent Pines breathed a sigh of relief. But even then, questions lingered. Was Quarles truly the latchkeeper, or had the real predator remained free all along? Grant Quarles has undergone extensive rehabilitation and shown clear progress. His early release reflects his successful completion of our program. Public reaction was swift and furious. Survivors of Quarles' attacks described his release as a betrayal. Many believe he was not only unrepentant but dangerous. They said he's a new man. But I still see his face in my nightmares. They're letting a monster walk free. Then, just months after Quarles' release, the disappearances began again. 3 hikers gone, each from a location disturbingly close to the sites in 1987, and at each scene, the same object was found: a rusted iron latch, left behind like a signature. We're investigating every lead, whether it's Quarles or someone else. I promise we'll find whoever's responsible, but promises mean little to a town gripped by fear. Is this the work of a copycat, or Has the latchkeeper truly returned to finish what he started? And if it's not Quarles, who or what is out there waiting in the woods? As the mystery deepens, questions swirl around the man once accused of being the latchkeeper. Did Grant Quarles use his years behind bars to plan his next move? Or is someone else exploiting his infamy to sow fear in a community already on edge? Under the terms of his release, Grant Quarles is required to wear an ankle monitor and check in weekly with his parole officer. But in a place as vast and remote as Crescent Pines, are these measures enough to keep the community safe? Parole officer: he's under 24/7 GPS monitoring, and we've set strict boundaries he cannot cross. If he does, we'll know immediately. They say he's being watched, but how much good does that really do when you've got hundreds of miles of forest out there? People are scared, and we have every reason to be. Many residents are taking matters into their own hands, installing security cameras, forming neighborhood watch groups, and even organizing armed patrols to search the woods. But the fear remains palpable. For the families of the original victims, the pain has never gone away. And now, with the recent disappearances, they're left to wonder, was justice ever served? They let him out because they thought he was rehabilitated. But if he's innocent, where's the real latchkeeper? And if he's guilty, why would they gamble with more lives? The mystery continues to unravel. Investigators are working tirelessly, but as the days pass and no new leads emerge, one thing is clear: Crescent Pines is no longer the safe haven it once was. We don't have the luxury of jumping to conclusions. Whether it's Quarles or someone else, we'll bring them to justice. I promise you that. What do you think? Should Quarles have been released? Is the latchkeeper truly back, or has a new predator claimed the title? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this evolving story. In Crescent Pines, fear isn't just a feeling, it's a way of life. For the survivors of Grant Quarles' past crimes, the fear has never left. And now, with fresh disappearances echoing the horrors of 1987, it's a question that must be asked. Can justice truly be served? When survivors live in constant fear, they told us he'd pay for what he did, that he'd never hurt anyone again. But how do you live knowing he's out there, just walking free? How do you sleep at night when the people in charge of protecting us won't even admit they made a mistake? Later in this story, we'll uncover the hospital reports that convinced the parole board to grant Quarles his release despite his horrifying history and chilling lack of remorse during his original trial. What did they see that the victims and their families could not? What exactly led professionals to conclude that a man convicted of such heinous crimes could be safely released? And were the warning signs overlooked or deliberately ignored? For 30 years, the shadow of the latchkeeper has loomed over Crescent Pines, but the questions have never been answered. Is this the work of a copycat, or has the original predator returned? And if Quarles was innocent, how many years did the real latchkeeper spend watching from the sidelines, free to strike again? Grant Quarles insists he's innocent, even now. But the timing of these new disappearances is too perfect to ignore. Is it possible he's playing a game, exploiting the system that let him go? Or is someone else out there, someone who's been hiding in plain sight this entire time? For decades, the forest has kept its secrets, but with each disappearance, it whispers the same question. If Quarles isn't the latchkeeper, then who is? The answers may lie in the past, hidden in the details of Quarles' trial, the stories of the survivors, and the choices made by those sworn to protect the community. But with fear gripping Crescent Pines once again, one thing is certain: this story is far from over. The forest is watching, and somewhere, so is the latchkeeper. Grant Quarles' case is complex, but not unprecedented. Men like him, those with histories of violent offenses and manipulative behavior, often excel in structured environments like prison or rehabilitation programs. They can appear reformed, even convincing professionals of their transformation. But once outside those controlled settings, the risk of reoffending skyrockets. Dr. Harper highlights a disturbing pattern seen in cases like Quarles, the ability to mask true intent. While the Pathways to Redemption program declared him rehabilitated, critics argue the system relies too heavily on self-reported progress and superficial metrics. Serial offenders like the latchkeeper, if Quarles is indeed guilty, thrive on control and power. The disappearances in Crescent Pines all bear hallmarks of a methodical predator, isolated locations, minimal evidence, and symbolic calling cards like the iron latch. These are not impulsive acts. They are calculated, and they suggest an offender who plans meticulously. If Quarles isn't the latchkeeper, then whoever is has studied his methods carefully. Either way, the public has every reason to be afraid. Ellison's analysis raises chilling possibilities. Has Quarles been hiding in plain sight, perfecting his methods over decades? Or has someone else stepped into the role, using his infamy as a shield? We stand by our assessment of Grant Quarles. His progress over 20 years demonstrated genuine change. While we understand the community's concerns, we believe it's important to give individuals a chance at redemption. This is the inherent risk with programs like Pathways. They emphasize hope and reform, which is noble, but they underestimate the enduring nature of certain psychological disorders. Quarles' history suggests deep-seated tendencies that can't be erased with therapy alone. Quarles' release wasn't just about his perceived rehabilitation. It also reflected systemic pressures over crowded prisons, parole board quotas, and legal frameworks that prioritize second chances. The question is, at what cost? The victims' families feel abandoned, and now, with new disappearances, the justice system is facing backlash it cannot ignore. Mitchell points out that parole decisions are rarely as cut and dry as they seem, but with each passing day, the consequences of Quarles' release become harder to justify. As experts debate the risks of Quarles' release, the community of Crescent Pines remains caught in a web of fear and speculation. With each new disappearance, the legend of the latchkeeper grows darker. But one question lingers. If this isn't Quarles, then who or what is stalking the woods of Crescent Pines? Coming up, exclusive documents revealing why the hospital recommended Quarles' release and why investigators believe the latchkeeper may be closer than anyone realizes. Grant Quarles may no longer be behind bars, but for his victims, the scars remain. Their lives have been forever altered, their sense of safety shattered. That the nightmare is far from over. Is justice ever truly served in cases like this? Can any sentence or any program erase the fear and pain left behind? Does his release mean an innocent man paid the price while a true predator remained free to strike again? As Crescent Pines waits for answers, one truth is undeniable. The past has a way of creeping into the present, and sometimes the monsters we fear never really go away, wondering if safety is a fleeting illusion. But as the shadows grow longer, one question remains: is the latchkeeper still out there? Or have we all been looking in the wrong direction? For more chilling cases like this one, explore our playlist on serial offenders, from unsolved mysteries to shocking courtroom trials. Dive deeper into the darkest corners of the human mind. Have your own theories about the latchkeeper. Do you think justice was served, or was it a grave mistake? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters in conversations like these. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we uncover new details in this evolving case.